You're standing at a crosswalk, an ordinary one, the kind you've crossed 100 times without thinking. The light is red. Around you, the crowd accumulates the way weather does, gradually, then all at once. Shoulders, coat sleeves, the sound of someone's bag shifting against their hip. You're not looking at any of them. You don't need to. They're background, the way furniture is background, the way traffic noise is background. They exist the way wallpaper exists, present, necessary, invisible. Then something happens. You don't mean to do it. You hold a stranger's face a half second too long. Not long enough to be noticed, just long enough for something to slip. The person is carrying a coffee cup in a way that suggests the morning has already been difficult. There's a quality to their stillness, not peace, but something more like exhaustion wearing the mask of peace. And in that half second, something shifts in you. Not a thought, not a feeling you have a name for, something structural. The way a hairline crack doesn't break a wall, but changes what the wall is. The light turns green. Everyone moves. You move with them. But something has already happened that you don't have words for. Something that's happened before, probably many times, in grocery stores and train cars and waiting rooms. And every time you've let it pass without examining it. You've felt this. You've never said it out loud. There's a reason. There's a barista at the coffee shop 3 blocks from wherever you are right now. You've seen her maybe a dozen times. You know her order-taking face, the tilt of her chin when she calls a name, the way she pauses mid-pour sometimes, just for a half second before she sets the cup down and moves on. You've never wondered why she pauses. It doesn't occur to you to wonder. She's part of the furniture of your morning. There's a window, lit yellow, framed in dark, glimpsed from a train moving through the outskirts of somewhere you don't live. A lamp on, a figure moving across the back of the room, and then it's gone. You were traveling. You had somewhere to be. You looked back at your book. And then there are the moments, brief, unbidden, when one of these people suddenly becomes real. Not symbolically real, not poetically real. Actually, physically, undeniably real. With a morning that started before you arrived. With something they're quietly carrying that you can't see. With a whole interior architecture that has nothing to do with you and never did. The barista's pause is about something. The lamp in that window is still on. You've had this feeling dozens of times, maybe hundreds. It arrives without warning and leaves just as fast, and you've never once had a word for it. Here's the strange part. Not that you lack the word, but that nobody gave it to you. Not in school, not in any book you read growing up, not in any conversation you've had. The language simply wasn't there. Which means either nobody else has felt this, or something else entirely is true. Here's something nobody told you because there's no reason anyone would. You are the camera. Not a camera, the camera. The one fixed point through which everything else passes. The city outside your window isn't a city full of people. It's a backdrop. The barista who hands you your coffee isn't a person with a commute and a childhood and a specific fear about money. She's a function, a prop that performs barista. The man reading on the bench across the park exists for exactly as long as you're looking at him. When you turn away, he stops. This isn't cruelty. It isn't even selfishness. It's structure. It's the way consciousness works before anyone teaches it to do otherwise. You are the subject, everyone else is the weather. Think about the last time you walked through a crowd and actually held a face in your mind afterward. Not someone you recognized, a stranger. The way they were looking at something you couldn't see, the particular angle of their shoulders. You don't. You let them go before you've even fully registered them, because your brain has already moved on to the next frame, and the frame after that, and the 1,000 decisions ahead of you today that feel, to you, like the content of reality. Their lives are happening at the same volume as yours. Their Tuesday morning is just as loud, just as specific, just as full of things that didn't go right and a text they're still thinking about. But from inside your skull, there's no signal for that. No frequency on which their interiority transmits. So you move through the world like the protagonist moves through a film set. Everything arranged around your path, the extras filling in the background, the details sharpening only when the camera needs them to. And then sometimes, briefly, the architecture shifts in exactly the way it already did at that crosswalk. A face, just a face. And something in the set dressing flickers. There's someone in that crosswalk. Not the idea of someone, an actual person, standing 3 feet from you, waiting for the same light. This morning, they woke up at 6:47 and lay there for 4 minutes before getting up. Not because they were tired, because they were putting something off. A text they hadn't answered, a conversation still unfinished in their chest from 2 nights ago. They ate toast with the wrong kind of jam because they were out of the right kind, and it was a stupider disappointment than it had any right to be. They stood at the sink and looked at their own face and thought about their sister, briefly, for no reason they could trace. They're carrying a bag that's slightly too heavy on one side. They shifted it twice on the walk here. Nobody noticed, including you. There's a joke they thought of yesterday that they haven't told anyone yet. It's not even that funny, but it's theirs, sitting in their pocket, waiting for the right moment that may or may not come. The unresolved thing, the one they woke up early with, it's still there. Not loud, just present the way a bruise is present. They're not thinking about it right now, but they will be in about 6 minutes, when the next thing they have to do doesn't quite fill the whole space in their head. They've been going through something for the past 3 weeks that's made them quieter in ways that nobody around them has named yet. And then the light changes, and they walk, and they're gone. Back to silhouette, back to set dressing, back to the peripheral motion you don't track because there's no reason to. But something has already shifted. Because now you know the toast was the wrong jam. You know about the bruise. You know about the joke still waiting in their pocket. You can't unknow it. You can't unknow it. The feeling you just had, that sudden involuntary awareness that the stranger beside you contains an entire world. It's old, older than you. People have been circling it for centuries, but every tradition that almost reached it used the light to look somewhere else. Buddhist thought has an image for it, Indra's net, an infinite web with a jewel at every node, each jewel reflecting every other jewel. It's reaching for the same thing you felt at the crosswalk. But the tradition's answer is to dissolve the self that's doing the noticing, to move through the shock rather than sit inside it. In 1759, Adam Smith saw it too. We can't feel what another person feels, so we imagine it. He called it fellow feeling. It's what you did when you invented the wrong jam and the too heavy bag. But Smith wanted to use that instinct as an engine for morality, not sit in the vertigo of it. Levinas, writing after the Second World War, came even closer. The face of a stranger makes a claim on you that you can't reason your way out of. But he wanted to talk about what you owe them, not what it's like to just stand there holding the feeling with nowhere to put it. Centuries of reaching, each one lit a candle in the same dark room and used the light to look at something else. None of them stopped to look at the feeling itself. It took until 2012, and it took a blogger. You've parked the car, the engine ticks down into silence, and you don't get out. You don't know why. There's nothing wrong. You just sit there with your hands still loosely on the wheel, watching a stranger walk past the window. A woman in a gray coat, carrying something, looking at her phone, and she's gone in 2 seconds. Completely gone. Already around the corner. But something happened. Your chest does a thing. Not pain, not quite. Something between tightening and opening, like a door that isn't sure which direction it swings. And for a moment, just a moment, you can't quite locate yourself at the center of things. The street outside is still happening. A man stops to check something in his bag. Someone's window 2 floors up has a light on. A child is being carried somewhere. All of it is just continuing, without you, completely indifferent to whether you get out of the car or not. This isn't a thought. You're not thinking anything. It's something your body does before your mind can name it. A sudden vertiginous sense that the world is enormously, terrifyingly full. That every lit window up there contains an entire life going about its own business. That the woman in the gray coat has arrived somewhere by now, and she's standing in a room you will never see. You sit with this for another few seconds. Then you get out of the car, you lock it, you go inside, you get on with the evening. The world doesn't stop being this way. You're the one who looks away. There's a man named John Koenig, not a philosopher, not a linguist, someone who noticed a gap, the same gap you've been sitting inside for the last several minutes, and decided to do something about it. In 2012, on a blog called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, he published a definition. He built the word from the French verb sonder, meaning to probe, to plumb the depths, and shaped it into something that hadn't existed the day before. The word was Sonder. The definition goes like this: the realization that each random passerby has a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. An epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground, with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives that you'll never know existed, in which you might appear only once as an extra sipping coffee in the background, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, as a lighted window at dusk. A lighted window at dusk. He didn't discover the feeling. He just gave it a door. The feeling was already there, unnamed, accumulating in the dark, carried alone in silence by everyone who'd ever felt it, and half convinced it might be theirs only. The absence of the word was itself a kind of loneliness. the same loneliness the word describes. What Koenig did was simpler than philosophy and, in a way, harder. He was willing to treat the unnamed feeling as something that deserved its own word, not a stepping stone to an ethical theory, not a doorway into a spiritual practice, just the feeling, standing on its own, allowed to be real. Now, go back to the crosswalk, back to her. She crossed the street. You watched her go. She walked 4 blocks north and stopped at a pharmacy. She stood in the cold medicine aisle for longer than she needed to, not because she couldn't find what she wanted, but because she was deciding something else entirely. Her apartment had a particular quality of light in the afternoon, the kind that comes in low through dirty glass and turns everything amber and slightly underwater. She sat at the kitchen table. She didn't take her coat off right away. There was a half-finished cup of tea from the morning, cold now, still where she'd left it. She looked at it for a few seconds, then she got up and poured it out. That was her afternoon. That's all of it you'll ever know. Now pull back, not metaphorically, actually pull back. The apartment building, the block, the neighborhood, the city from above at dusk when the windows start to light up one by one against the dark. Every lit window is this. Not like this, not similar to this. Every single one is this. A particular quality of afternoon light, a cold cup of something, a decision that isn't about what it looks like on the surface, a coat still on because sitting down felt like enough for now. Multiplied by thousands, multiplied by millions. The mind tries to hold this and then it doesn't. It can't. The scale is too much. More lives than any single brain was built to carry. So it flinches. It retreats back to the one life it can actually manage. But something has shifted. You can't go back to the version of the crosswalk where she was backdrop. You've seen the light in her kitchen. You don't know her name, you never will. But the architecture of before, where you were the subject and she was scenery, that architecture has a crack in it now. And cracks, once they're there, don't fill themselves in. So here's what nobody tells you about Sonder. It isn't warm. Maybe you expected it to feel like connection, like suddenly the world got bigger and you got less alone in it. That's not what happens. What happens is distance. The stranger at the pharmacy counter becomes real, and the realness doesn't pull them closer. It makes the space between you exact. A specific number of feet between two people who will never, not once, know what the other is carrying. There's a lit window somewhere on a street you've walked 100 times. You've never looked at it. Now you can't stop. The light is on. Someone's in there. They have a name. They have a drawer full of things they can't throw away. They have a version of this same hour that belongs entirely to them and not even slightly to you. That's the texture of it. Not sadness exactly, not grief exactly. The closest thing is the feeling of holding something true that you didn't ask to know and can't unknow. Something that doesn't make your life better or worse, just permanently different in weight. You're still the center of your own life, you have to be. But now the edges of that centeredness have a quality they didn't have before. A kind of cold air coming through. Not a wound, not a gift. A crack that lets in the fact of other people. Their full, unreachable, never to be entered fact. You live in that house now. Which is why, when you're back at the crosswalk, the light is red. The crowd has gathered the way crowds gather, without deciding to, without knowing each other, shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the curb. Silhouettes, same as before, the same geometry, except you can't see them that way anymore. That one, the woman in the dark coat, slightly apart from the others. There's something in how she's holding her phone, not scrolling, just holding it, waiting for a message, or dreading one. You don't know which. You only know it's one of those two things, because you've stood exactly like that. The man at the far edge of the group has coffee. He's barely touched it. His eyes are somewhere else entirely, some room you'll never see, some conversation that ended badly or didn't end at all. The teenager with the headphones isn't listening to music. You can tell by the stillness in her face. She just needed the headphones in so no one would talk to her. You've done that too. One by one, they don't light up. They don't glow. They just become opaque, dense, the specific, ordinary, unremarkable weight of a person who has a life. The light changes. You step off the curb, you cross with them, and somewhere behind you, someone is standing at the edge of the crowd, and you are the silhouette. You are the figure they can't quite see into. You are the background. You always were. You're lying in bed, eyes open. The ceiling above you is just a ceiling, white or off-white, slightly uneven where the paint dried wrong. And somewhere in the dark behind your eyes, it starts to change. The ceiling becomes windows, hundreds of them, thousands, each one lit from inside, each one a room where someone is still awake, still turning something over, still unable to put it down. Somewhere out there, someone is also lying in the dark. They're also carrying something they didn't have a word for until very recently. Maybe they still don't. There are other words that